Well, I know what you're thinking. MILNOR, not another Q&A, but this is a good one. Boy, I just took a quick look through this baby. Scary, scary, scary. Makes you think, man, I got a lot to learn. Also, this has been a busy morning of letter writing. This is about to have a letter written on the back side of it, and right now it's just a black and white photo. Now, people ask me what kind of printer I have. This is like a thermal printer that I just picked up, which is basically for printing copy. It's black and white only, and as you can see, the quality sucks, but I kind of like it. So everyone, you don't need a fancy printer. Anything will work. The key is to actually make prints. Yes, lesson learned. Oh, by the way, have I mentioned my space pen? I do love it. This is a Q&A. I am one person with one opinion. This is Q&A number 35. I posted 34 before 33 accidentally, and that's how we got here. And now my eyes are crossed, but I will get 33 posted sometime later this week, maybe. And then 35, I don't know, somewhere down the line. But these are good questions. These are fun. These are short. These feel like Weight Watchers questions. They're trim and tight, but yet I have a tendency to ramble. So I don't know, brace yourself. Now, the good news is, not a cloud in the sky today. I've got the blinds pulled down. Looks like a big softbox, and it's got the I don't know, the glamour shot lighting going on here, which I need. I'm only 53, but I am high miles, people. Got a lot of miles, and I'm in need of an oil change. My undercarriage needs work. Okay, question number 1. Again, one person, one opinion. Everyone calm down. Don't make me come over there. Question number 1, have you ever used Ilford 3200, and why would you use Ilford 3200 over Kodak P3200? The short answer is yes. I've used every single film I can get my grubby mitts on over the years. I used quite a lot of Ilford 3200 as a matter of fact, and I'll tell you exactly why and when I would use 3200 over the Kodak P3200. I prefer the Kodak film. Let me just state that first. I prefer the Kodak because the Kodak has more grain than the P3200 Ilford. It has more. And I love grain. I've never seen grain I don't like. I've never seen too much grain. The lab owner in LA that I used to use all the time said to me one time when I walked in and dropped off a bag of P3200, he said, everybody's coming in here trying to figure out ways to reduce grain, and MILNOR, you come in here and dump this, and we realize how much you love that grain. Grain is a fantastic thing. It's gorgeous. The P3200 is a T grain. It's super sharp. The Ilford I would use when I would shoot something like a portrait session or a wedding, when the client told me they liked grain, but I didn't necessarily believe them. So I would use P3200, which gave you a nice grain, but it wasn't quite as chunky and golf ball grain as the P3200. So that's when I used it. And so again, I prefer the P3200 Kodak. And the other thing about Ilford is you could get it in 120, 220. So when I was shooting the Hasselblad and shooting portraits, if someone said, oh, I really love your grain, I really love your work, I would typically use that Ilford 3200 because it was a little safer bet. And the Ilford's a good film. I think the true film speed of the Ilford is quite a bit slower than the true film speed of the Kodak. And I think that's why you have less grain. I think the true film speed of the Kodak is about 1250. It's not a 3200 film. You need to push it to get it to 32. And I think the Ilford is about 1,000. I think the Ilford 3200 film is really about 1,000 true speed, which means it's a little finer grained. That's a good question, though. They're both great films. I think Fuji made Neopan 1600. That was another film. That was kind of a sleeper film. When you were out on assignment and you were shooting, Tri-X was the number one film that you were going to see. I would then follow that by HP5, Ilford, and then it basically unraveled into a bunch of strange things. But if someone walked up shooting Neopan, that was a novelty. And everyone was either kind of like, I'm suspicious of you, punk, or I want to be that guy. Bro crush right there. I just gave someone an entire huge box of Neopan that someone had given to me, and this other person I knew was out using film all the time, and film now is just ungodly expensive. And I was like, I'm just going to package some up, ship it to them. And I did. And some portrait, and some Kodak, and a bunch of other stuff. Because that's how nice I am. Just remember that, you haters out there, always pinging me with these nasty comments that make me question myself. Not really. Number 2. Not number 2, but question number 2. Get your mind out of the gutter, people. How do you feel about Sean Penn playing journalist/doctor? I don't really have much of a feeling about that. Sean Penn, by the way, lifetime pass in my book. Now, Sean Penn's kind of a weird dude, and he punched Ron Galella, which I think is hilarious, but also kind of a signature defining moment of Sean Penn's youth. He played Jeff Spicoli. I don't care what he does. I really don't. You have a lifetime pass if you played Jeff Spicoli, one of the best characters of all time. Not to mention, he was also in The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, which is one of my all-time favorite films. So Sean Penn gets a pass. Here's the thing about Sean Penn. I think a lot of the right-wing folks out there hate Sean Penn, as they hated Jane Fonda. They hate anyone who is going to question any kind of political or combat scenario that is politically, ideologically aligned with the right. So I understand why people are like hating on Sean Penn. The thing about Sean Penn that's really not about Sean Penn, it's just about any human that has a curiosity as to what the situation is actually like. I can't hate too much on that person. So when he went to Baghdad before the war and looked around and all the right-wingers out there went crazy and said, oh, he's a traitor and he's doing this and that, he was just going to look around, right? I think some of the weird shenanigans with press conferences and all that and the Chapo Guzman, that scenario, that's a bit weird. That's a bit on the outside. And he's looking a little bit weird these days, let's be honest. Again, great actor. But I don't look at these people and say, well, I'm going to go out and get all my news from a Hollywood celebrity. That seems like a bad idea. So when it comes to a news story, you have to consider your source. You have to basically, these days, with the way the media operates, you have to triangulate your sources. So if I'm trying to dig down on what's really happening with a story, let's say something that's happening in Russia right now, I will triangulate that story. Sean Penn is not one of the triangulations, just like Jane Fonda would not have been a triangulation, or any other celebrity journalist that's out there doing that. Yes, is it interesting that they've decided to go do that and put themselves in harm's way? Ukraine is a wild card right now. Very, very dangerous place to be covering anything. So I kind of say, okay, well, you had the guts to go over there and do that. I can't knock you for that. But I'm triangulating through actual journalism sources. That term now, journalism source, again, has been radicalized like anything else. But for example, there are writers based in America who have Russian upbringing, who have specialized in writing about Russia for years, for decades. That is one of my triangulations. Then I will choose a mainstream media outlet that I trust, and there are very, 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 very few of those left on the planet. And most of the ones I'm trusting are not based in the United States because many of our major journalism apparatus here in the country are now owned by corporations who have a messaging statement they want to get across. They have advertisers they're trying to appease. And also, our journalism rules here are very, very loose. If you publish something that's not accurate, even if you knew it was not accurate when you published it, there's very little repercussions. Sometimes you'll have to run a statement saying we made a mistake. That's very rare, and oftentimes those statements are buried so far back in the publication that no one's paying attention. Whereas other countries do not have the same freedom of the press. If you publish something that's not verified and you get caught, there is a penalty and you can go to jail. Consequently, those journalists tend to work pretty tightly. So again, journalists with decades of history writing about one topic in one region and they speak the language, that's one triangulation point. Media outlet is another. And then I always look for a third to try to verify whether or not a story is there. Sadly, that's how you have to operate in today's journalism because most of what you see in here is not journalism anymore. It's some sort of entertainment, if you will, or political just ideology, put into a media outlet because they're trying to support one candidate or the other. It's boring and idiotic. So Sean Penn, I don't know. I'm not really feeling anything in any one particular direction about Sean Penn, other than I mentioned before, Jeff Spicoli and Secret Life of Walter Mitty. He shoots film, man. Bro crush. Number 3. How do you balance the story in your mind versus the story unfolding in front of you? It's a good question. The truth is you just have to react to what's in front of you. You can dream up scenario after scenario, but when you get there, reality's going to play its own hand and you have to adapt to it. So in my head, it's almost impossible not to try and preconceive things. but it's often a slippery slope. And as they say, the path to salvation is as thin as a razor's edge. And I think that's true. I think you just have to react to what's in front of you. And I think the basic ingredients of photography are going to apply to whatever scenario you're in: light, timing, composition. So if you're sent on assignment to shoot a portrait, you're thinking light, timing, composition. If you're on the way to that portrait that would get assigned, and let me explain why that would happen. Reporters were as competitive as photographers. Reporters are trying to get space in the premium places in the paper, which are the section fronts: A1, B1, C1, D1. Reporters always wanted to assign a photographer because if a story came with art, it had a better chance of landing on that premium real estate. So they would assign anything, regardless of how awful it was from a photographic perspective. So for example, you go to a city council meeting, you're in a windowless room with fluorescent lights, and you're shooting Fujichrome 100, and you're cursing the reporter the entire time because there's no way to make a decent photo in there. Plus you got to use a gel and a filter to balance out for the fluorescent light, and it's a nightmare. And then when you're all said and done, you've got a boring picture of people sitting at a conference table. So I get assigned something like that, and I'm driving there cursing this entire thing, and my scanner crackles and says high speed chase, pursuit, crash, neighborhood, injuries. And I hear the address come in, and I'm like a block away. And I look up and I see the aftermath of what had just gone down, and it was bad. Bodies in the street. It's 12 noon sun, Phoenix. Horrible lighting condition, which means strobe on camera. I got to fill anything, pop little bits of fill in to fill the shadows on this. Again, shooting 100 speed transparency. I've got the front of a house with a portal coming out. You've got deep shade on the front going into direct sun. 100 speed transparency. Cops, fire department haven't even arrived on the scene yet. There's 2 cars smashed into the front yard, into the front of this house. There's a body in the street. What we didn't know at the time is underneath the car was a child that was alive but had been injured pretty bad. We didn't know. So the first thing I do is think, where do I park my truck where I'm not going to get boxed in? So I park far enough away, I'm not going to get boxed in, so that I can get out with the film when I can, but I got to be close enough because I need to be shooting right now. So I jump out, long lens, short lens, 2 cameras, strobe, start shooting. Slowly the cops and the fire department guys start coming, so you have to say, how do I stay out of the way but get the work that I need? So you're bouncing in and out, you're making sure there are certain places where you cannot go. There are certain things you cannot do at a scene like that. And if you do it, you're done. They're going to either get, you could get arrested, you could get, held, whatever. They're not happy. And then they see you next time down the road and they're like, that's the guy that screwed up before. So you got to be very careful. So shoot. Now my pager's going off nonstop because the headquarters has heard about this thing and they're wondering where I am and if I'm there, but I don't really want to take time to answer the page because this is happening so quickly. Shooting, changing film, thinking I've got it covered, right? And now I'm like, okay. In my head, I'm starting to piece together how this is going to fit together as a story. Wrecker comes. Now I've been there for probably 45 minutes, right? Which is a long time to be at a scene like that. Wrecker comes and pulls the car away from the front of the house, exposing child underneath. Event ratchets back up to 11 in terms of chaos, panic, screaming parents or whoever it was on the porch. All of this is boom, 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 boom. And I have to get right in there. I have to get in and get out. So I get in, I lean in, and I make an image straight down, probably with a 50. Strobe popped in, girl on her back, obviously injured, and her giant, enormous hand of a firefighter on her chest. And boom, that's my shot. Make it. I'm shooting film. I don't know if you can't see it, but I'm like, got it, get out of here, get to the paper, get it in, runs the next day. There is no point in trying to pre-visualize any of that stuff. I was simply reacting to what's happening at the time. And you work for a newspaper, you're going to do that every day, all day long. That scene might seem like it's this traumatic scene. It's not after a while. After a while, it's like drop-down menu. This is what I'm here. This is my role. This is how I do this. This is how I cover this. Get in, get out, move on. Because after I get back to the paper and drop that film and run it and process it and write the captions, I got to go back and do the boring city council thing right afterwards. So your life goes like this. Boom, 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 boom. That's why it gets to be very addictive. Number 4. How would you recommend printing your portfolio? That's a great question. Somebody wrote me an email a few days ago asking this question, and I said I would add it into the Q&A. It depends on, I have a lot of questions first. Are you a consumer, a prosumer, or a pro, and who is the portfolio intended for? Those are questions that I would want to identify. If this is just you putting a portfolio together for yourself, that's one thing. If it's going to go to an art buyer in New York, that's another thing. So most of the time, especially these days, I would never make just one portfolio. I would make a variety of portfolios because we have all the tools to do this very inexpensively. And even if you spent $300 on a blurb lay flat book as a portfolio, $300 in the portfolio realm is cheap. We used to spend way more than that putting portfolios together. And those portfolios were heavy and big and laborious, and you couldn't change them. Once you had them made, for the most part, unless you wanted to disassemble them and take out pages and put more pages in, we spent way more than $300 a year on portfolios. I did, plus all the mailings I did. So I did mailings every month. I was sending hundreds and hundreds of mailers out in the mail, which I loved doing. But the short answer is I would do books and I would do prints. I would make a set of prints in case you're going to do a portfolio review where you're talking about individual images across the table from an editor or someone who's been in the industry for a while. Oftentimes you have to pay to go to those portfolio reviews, and depending on who's putting the portfolio review together, that's a really good use of money. Plus, if the reviewers are good, they're going to be honest with you, and they're going to say, yes, this is good, or no, you're not quite there yet. And if you've never had constructive criticism of your work, which is a real possibility, especially for anyone who exists only in the online world, it's going to be nice. It's going to sting a little bit. It should sting a little bit because these are people that don't have time to waste. They're looking at your work and they're saying, is there a way for me to work with this person or not? And is their work at a level that's there yet? And when they say to you, this isn't good enough, or you're not there yet, or you need more time, most of the people in the online world are not used to that, because if you do that online, people will attack the person who's saying that, saying, oh, you're sour grapes, or you're from the old generation, or you don't know, you're just unhappy, because everyone wins a trophy now. In the portfolio world, you don't always win a trophy, and sometimes the guy with the trophy is going to smack it upside your head just for fun. Because, I don't know, maybe he ran out of cigarettes, right? He smoked 60 already today, but he doesn't have that 61st, and he's jonesing, man, and he's going to take the trophy and go pop right in your face just for fun. And the great part is you get to weed through that. You get to say, okay, guy's having a bad day. I'll move on to this person and take my lumps over here. That's the beauty of a real portfolio challenge. Make a set of prints. You do not need big prints. When you go to a portfolio review, the people who walk in with those enormous black print holders and they're wearing white gloves, do you know what the reviewers think? Good grief, why would you do that? That's what they think. Why do I need to see these prints at that size? And why are you going to make me wear gloves? No one wants to do that anymore. Everyone's moving too quick. They want to get back to their Instagram feed because that's where the important version of the world lives. Make small prints. I'm a huge fan of 1114 for portfolio reviews. At the very largest, 1620. I would never go any larger than that, and frankly, I think the smaller prints are fine. I love 5x7s. I think they're great, and plus a box of 5x7s fits in any bag and travels really well. But I would also do a book, because the book, especially if you're working in narrative form, if you have 10 unrelated images or 20 unrelated images that are just singles, you don't necessarily need a book portfolio, even though I think it's a good thing to have and it's a very simple thing, an affordable thing. But if you're trying to show a narrative story, book is the best form to do that. And you can show copy, you can show imagery, and you can show design. And those show that you are more than a photographer, that you know how to tell stories, that you know how to edit and sequence and design. That's a good skill to have. So I would do both, prints and book. Number 5, any recommendations for starting out in film photography? Why, yes. Thank you for asking. I do have some thoughts about film photography. Seeing as that's what I did for most of my life. I still love film. I can't imagine using it anytime soon. Logistically, it doesn't work for me, but I know a lot of the kids out there, they love it. They think it's new. So you know what? Keep it going, kids. Keep the film in circulation and use, and I hope it survives. I really do, because it's such a great medium. My advice about getting started is very simple. Whatever camera you have to shoot film will suffice. That's all you need. You don't need anything spectacular. Get a 35mm lens or a 50mm lens and you're off to the races. The key with film photography is to understand it and to ease yourself into film photography. My advice is to find a lab that will both process the film according to your requirements and also scan the film at high resolution, every single frame. Scanning is the bottleneck that keeps so many people from using film because the scanners that are available are not great, not numerous, and they're just it's a weird thing. It's not to say that there aren't scanners out there. There are, but the solutions are not good and they're getting worse in my opinion. So if you can find a lab that will process the film and scan every image high resolution, then you basically are shooting film, but you have a digital workflow. And instead of saying, I've got to learn how to expose film, which is a language to itself, then I have to learn how to process film, which is a language to itself. Then I have to learn how to print film, which is another language to itself. That can be daunting for a lot of people who just look at film and say, I know everyone's talking about this. It's supposed to be really cool. All the hipsters are using it. I want to try it. Great. Use the film, but just get it into the digital workflow. And then if you like film or you love film and you want to keep doing it, then start thinking about processing on your own, printing on your own, printing in a wet darkroom. Again, you can spend the rest of your life printing in a wet darkroom and never become a master printer. And I am not joking or exaggerating. The darkroom is a language and a world unto itself, and it's a wonderful place to be, but it requires commitment. And the same can be said of processing. You can go easy. You can do D76, 68, 10 minutes. And process that way for the rest of your life and be totally fine. Or you can dive into the rabbit hole, the minutia of using the 50 different kinds of developer out there and stand development or hot development with constant agitation and all the other variables. Make it easy on yourself. Shoot film with the camera you have, go to a lab, get it scanned and processed, and have a look at what you think. That's what I would do. Number 6, how do you feel about the journalism coverage of Ukraine? And what about journalism and Instagram, or journalists using Instagram? You know, most journalists are using Instagram, I would say, these days. I don't want to see Ukraine through Instagram. That's me personally. Everybody knows my opinions on Instagram. It trivializes the whole thing. And what I have seen from Ukraine on Instagram is not good. And by the way, you know, this is a signature moment of modern times, is this invasion, right? It's a big story. Do you want that story in a quarter of a second flip? Is that the kind of attention that you want to give it? Is that the kind of focus? Is that the kind of interest level that you have? Is that you just only want sound bites from what's happening? That's not me. So I have friends on the ground, journalists, photojournalists who are in Ukraine, and I've seen some good work coming out of Ukraine. But remember this, and I'm no expert on this, but this is a dynamic, fluid situation where there is shelling of civilian areas and it looks random. So in some places it looks methodical, block by block shelling, like in Grozny and Aleppo. And then in others it just looks like they're sending stray missiles and stray rounds and shells in, and that's terrorizing. You know, that's because you can't explain or you don't know where things are going to happen. So as a journalist, it's not like there's a front line and trenches, and you go, bad guys over there, good guys behind here, and as long as I stay in this area, I'm going to be fine. That's not true, especially in urban areas where shells and missiles are coming in, and we've all seen footage of people standing there like, hey, everything's fine, and then, you know, behind them something goes off. As a photographer, that is not a good scenario. That makes it exponentially more difficult. You've got Lindsay Addario, who's over there. I think she shoots for Getty. I don't know exactly who she works for. Tyler Hicks from the New York Times, Ron Haviv was there. Brendan Hoffman, I think, is another guy that's there. If you want to look at something that I think is the kind of coverage that I look for when it comes to something like Ukraine, go to the LA Times and look at Marcus Lamb. And Marcus Lamb is a writer and a photographer, and he did a piece about being in the Ukraine. The imagery it's not like 10 portfolio images. It's a story and images that are trying to give you a better understanding of what it actually likes to be, what it feels like to be there. It's not shock value. It's slower. They've given him space. They've given him the time and the inches in the paper to like tell what this story is. Now, Marcus also did, I don't know him. I've never met him, never spoken to him. Don't know anything about him. He was in Afghanistan. And I know that when the US pulled out of Afghanistan, he had made a lot of really good images around that time as well. So this is a guy who's putting the time in. The Times is giving him the time to do this. They're giving him the resources to do this. And they're giving him the space to tell the story. That is the kind of coverage I grew up with. And that is the kind of coverage that I'm after. I'm not after Instagram, where in a feed you may see a picture of Ukraine next to a backlit person with an old Land Cruiser and a felt hat and a dog in a national park. I don't want to see that. First of all, I don't want to see that picture ever again, ever, for any reason. But when you throw it next to something like Ukraine, it trivializes everything involved. So I haven't spent a lot of time looking for what's coming out of Ukraine. I'm waiting. Most of the time now with me, and remember, I'm slow. I'm a dinosaur. I read paper books and I write in a journal, okay? I was born in the wrong century. I wait for books. I wait for the books to come out. I do. I know that sounds bad, but we're talking a year to 18 months down the road. Books are typically where you start to begin to get the real story. When someone spends a year or 18 months doing research, and when I say research, I mean actual research. Think The New Yorker. If you have ever read about the fact-checking that's involved in a story that goes into The New Yorker, now you will know what journalism actually is. Fact-checking. Look it up. Many of the journalism outlets these days do not make a real effort to do this because they know there's no real penalty for printing things that may or may not be accurate. Sadly, that's the state of affairs. There are a few publications that spend inordinate amounts of time and resources fact-checking. And if every I isn't dotted, if every T isn't crossed, they will not run a story. That is what I'm looking for. And it's hard to find. But when you find it and you consume it, you can't go back to the other stuff that you know is BS. So take your time, relax. I don't know I see some of the images from Ukraine and it's like, I would not want to be there trying to shoot in that scenario because it looks really scary. But that's my take on journalism in Ukraine. Number 7, I'm going to do a film on this. Number 7 is what is a picture package? I'm going to do an entire film on this, and I have 2 picture packages on my desktop right now that I'm going to use to explain this. Okay, imagine me, 1993, mullet, Guns N' Roses t-shirt, thinking I'm cool, thinking I've got it all figured out, trying to get an internship at a newspaper. I try for a year to get an internship at a newspaper, and all I heard was no, you're never gonna get an internship. And so I am desperate. I'm like, I have no money. I'm living in a house in Austin, lucked out. My girlfriend knew this guy, an older guy who had a big house, and he had a giant entire upstairs, and he was like, look, I live here alone. It's ridiculous. You guys can just have the upstairs. So thank God I had this free place to live and was looking for an internship. I get one, finally, after a year. Go to the internship. And when you work in the journalism world, newspapers in particular, the vast majority of assignments you do have to be encapsulated in a single image. And that is a very unique skill set. On the flip side, once or twice a year, maximum, the paper would take a photographer or photographers and take away all of their daily duties and put them on a long-term project. That was the dream scenario. Everybody wanted to be on those long-term projects, but I'm an intern. No way in hell I'm ever gonna get that assignment. But in between those, and by the way, that long-term assignment would end up as its own special segment in the paper. So a separate edition, think New York Times Magazine, but not necessarily New York Times. This was in Arizona. So our paper would do a special segment, and the goal was to try to win the Pulitzer Prize. That was the idea behind those stories. I was never going to get that. Somewhere in between the single image and the full story was what was called the picture package. And the picture package was a 3 to 5 image package of images that was a little more than a single and a lot less than the long-term story. And that was a doable proposition. So when I was not on assignment, or I had one of those moments late afternoon, or my shift had ended and the light was good, I would constantly be out scouring the community for picture packages. And that's what they are. 3 to 5 image packages that have to be edited and sequenced. They're based on context, color, subject matter, all of those things. Think of them as a mini puzzle. They are amazing training ground for making books. because they are a gateway drug to bookmaking. If you sit down with 80 pages to design in a photo book, that is a daunting task for anyone. But if I said to you, here's 3 images, edit those together into a little picture package, that's a more doable proposition than editing an 80-page book. And so I want to do a film about this because they're a lot of fun. And anytime I go into the field where I know I have limited time and I'm never going to be able to tell a full story, I always in the back of my head say, at least walk away with a picture package. And I've got 2 that I shot recently that I'm going to share with you. Number 8, are you going to make a book from your Baja work? Chances are no. I don't have enough work from Baja to make a book. I was in Baja for a week and I was on a ship the whole time. And for the last 3 days, 2.5 days of the ship, we had 40 knot winds. So it was almost impossible to even get off the ship. And plus we had no contact with anyone on land because of COVID. So it was limited and it was a style of photography that I don't normally do. So I would call it seascapes and wildlife. That's not me in any way, shape, or form. I had a blast and I would do it again in a heartbeat if I had a chance. But I don't think I've really got enough to make a book. But what I will do is mock up covers, potential covers from that trip, because that's a good skill and it's training. That's like working out. So I'll take 4 or 5 images and I will mock up 4 or 5 different potential covers that would be the cover of the book if I had enough information to make a book. So again, I'm doing like workouts all the time, creative workouts. Think about curls, man. Yep, honey, if I'm not here, I'll be at the gym or the gun show. All right, so number 9. Any new mods on the TW200 front? Yes, funny you should ask. By the way, for those of you Luddites out there who don't know what a TW200 is, it is my Yamaha motorcycle TW200. It is an absolute blast, 17 horsepower, neck snapping acceleration. No, it's a blast. Yes, I have to put a rear rack on the T-Dub so that I can hold extra fuel and a duffel bag so that I can take it when I go camping. I'm also going to change out the foot pegs because the stock foot pegs are about the size of my thumb and they're very, very difficult when you're standing up off-road to balance on those pegs. They're tiny, they're horrible. But remember, this bike was first designed and released in 1986, I believe, or 87. And it's unchanged outside of front disc brake and electric start. Those are the 2 things that they've changed. The skid plate is horrible. It looks like it's made out of tin foil. I need to replace that. And also, I need to put the hand protectors, which bolt into the end of the handlebars, and then the metal wraps around and protects my hands with both plastic and metal. I need to put those on, and here's the thing. I don't have any tools. And from what I understand, I have to literally use one of those things that threads the handlebars. And I've heard that the handlebars on the T-Dub suck anyway, even though they're the only ones I've ever had on it. So to me, they're okay. But someone said get bars that are a little bit wider and then put risers on them so the bar's a little bit higher so that when you're standing off-road, the bars are a little bit higher. So I would love to do the bars, the risers, the hand protectors I need, because once you drop that bike off-road, and if you snap off a brake lever or a clutch lever and you're in the middle of nowhere, that's a problem. So the hand protectors, foot pegs, skid plate, and rear rack. And I think that's really all I would ever need to do to this bike. So that's it. That's where we are. And I think I need to get the rear rack first, because that's the essential thing. If I'm going to run into town and use it for grocery shopping and stuff, I need a way to carry stuff. Last question. You mentioned dead pixels on your XT2. Can you explain? Yeah, so I've had Fuji X-T2s now for years. I don't remember how old those cameras are, but I'm going to say they're probably 5 years old. I love that camera. I think it's a really, for what it cost and how functional it is and how many images I've made with it over the years. I love the X-T2, but sensors over time start to decay and really degrade. And one of the things that you'll see are dead pixels, and these you will see if you have an image that has a lot of black or darker tones and you enlarge that image, you will see just bright white spots scattered all over the sensor, and those are dead pixels. And on probably my single favorite image from Baja, I enlarged it because my wife wanted to see it, and I was like, wow, I've got a fair number of dead pixels on these X-T2s. So I'm at was it the end of the world? No, I can, clone those out in Photoshop. It's not a big deal. But whenever Fuji comes out with their new camera, which I heard is the XH2, I will probably get an XH2 and maybe give the X-T2s to my wife, or I will give them away to someone else that wants to use them. Because again, I got a lot of mileage out of those cameras. I have nothing but good things to say about those cameras, and but they're starting to decline a little bit. And as I mentioned, I think I showed this before, I mentioned it before, the tripod mounts in both of my XT2s are broken. They've come loose, the bolts or screws have come out, and now they just rattle around. So I can't really put those on a tripod anymore. And that's another real issue I'm having with it. But I feel like I got my money's worth out of those cameras, especially when you consider like digital camera lifespan, where people are, you know, buying 3, 4, 5 new cameras a year, and me having these for so long, and they're perfectly acceptable. My wife loves them. You know, it's one of the camera systems that she makes her best work with, and that's very telling, I think, of a camera system when you can hand it to somebody who's never used it, and they just click with it right off the bat. And again, you can use those big dials even wearing gloves in the winter. So it's a great camera system. Hey, friends, that's it. Q&A 35. Again, I'm one person with one opinion. Hold it against me. Go ahead. I dare you. You'll be back. You'll be back. Yes. So I appreciate it. Thanks. See you next time.